Mike Tyson's fork froze halfway to his mouth as the waiter pressed a pale hand flat against the tablecloth and told him this section was only for white guests. Tyson set the fork down slowly, pushed his chair back with a grinding screech that cut through the restaurant like a blade, and rose to his full width, every head in the dining room snapping toward the collision about to unfold. What happened in the next 90 seconds would become restaurant legend, a story whispered about for decades. Mike Tyson's fist was already clenched under the white tablecloth when the waiter put his hand on the plate and slid it backward, away from Tyson's guest, a black woman sitting across the table. The waiter didn't even look at her. He looked at Tyson like he was doing him a favor. What happened in the next 45 minutes would become one of the most whispered about stories in the history of high-end dining in Manhattan, a moment passed around boxing circles, restaurant kitchens, and hotel bars for decades, not because somebody got knocked out, because of what Mike Tyson chose not to do, and then what he did instead that hit harder than any punch ever could. But we gotta go back a little bit. Not far, just enough. It was 1995. Tyson had just gotten out, you know where. He'd served 3 years in the Indiana Youth Center, and the world didn't know what to make of him. Some people called him a monster. Some people called him a victim. Most people just called him dangerous and kept their distance. But Mike Tyson, the guy who once made $30 million in 91 seconds, was trying to do something nobody expected. He was trying to be normal. He was trying to sit at a table, eat a meal, and have a conversation with someone he cared about. That's it. That's all he wanted that night. The woman across from him was not a celebrity. She was someone from his old neighborhood, a friend from Brownsville who had written him letters the entire time he was locked up. Not love letters, real letters. Letters about the block, about who moved away, about her mother's health, about the church on the corner getting a new roof. Tyson later said those letters kept him from losing his mind. So when he got out, one of the first things he did was call her up and say, "Let me take you somewhere nice. You earned it." Now listen to me. The restaurant was on the Upper East Side. I'm not going to name it because legally it gets tricky, but people who were there know exactly which one I'm talking about. White tablecloths, candles on every table. The kind of place where a glass of water cost you $6 and they looked at you sideways if your watch wasn't worth more than the entree. Tyson walked in wearing a dark suit, no entourage, no bodyguards, just him and his friend. The hostess recognized him immediately. Her eyes got wide. She seated them at a corner table near the back. Quiet spot, good view of the room. Tyson pulled out the chair for his guest. He sat down. He opened the menu. And for about 12 minutes, everything was fine. Get this. The waiter who originally came to the table was professional, polite, took their drink orders, brought a bread basket, called Tyson sir, called his guest ma'am. It was smooth. Tyson ordered a bottle of wine, not the most expensive one, something in the middle. He didn't want to show off. He told his friend to order whatever she wanted. She ordered the salmon. He ordered a steak, medium rare, simple. Then the waiter's shift ended. A new waiter came to the table. Different guy entirely. Older, maybe mid-50s. Slicked back gray hair. Thin lips pressed together so tight they almost disappeared into his face. He walked up to the table holding a fresh basket of bread, and the first thing he did was set it down on Tyson's side. Only Tyson's side. Then he turned his back to the woman and faced Tyson directly, as if she wasn't sitting there at all. "Your entrees will be out shortly, sir," he said, only to Tyson. Tyson's friend looked down at her napkin. She didn't say anything, but Tyson saw it. He saw her shoulders drop half an inch. He saw her fingers curl around the edge of the cloth. He knew that posture. He'd seen it on his mother. He'd seen it on every woman in Brownsville who had ever walked into a store and been followed by a security guard, or been served last at a counter, or been spoken to without being spoken to. Tyson leaned forward. "Hey, she'd like some bread, too." The waiter blinked. "Of course." He moved the basket to the center of the table, barely, an inch, maybe 2. Then he walked away. Here's what nobody tells you about moments like this. They don't start with a bang. They start with a whisper, a slight, a millimeter of disrespect so small that if you complained about it, people would say you're overreacting. That's how it works. That's how it's designed to work. The insult is always small enough to be denied. But Tyson felt it, and he was already sitting straighter in his chair. The entrees came out. The waiter carried both plates. He set Tyson's steak down with both hands, centered it perfectly on the placemat, and said, "Your steak, sir, prepared exactly as requested." Then he turned to the woman. He held her plate with one hand low, almost at waist level, and dropped it in front of her with a clatter. The salmon slid to the edge of the plate. A sprig of garnish fell onto the tablecloth. He didn't apologize. He didn't even pause. Tyson's jaw tightened. His right hand came off the table and dropped to his thigh. His friend looked at him. She knew that look. Everyone in Brownsville knew that look. That was the look that preceded devastation. That was the face that Tyson wore in the tunnel before he walked out to fight. She reached across the table and put her hand on his wrist. "Mike, it's okay. Let's just eat." Tyson took a breath. He nodded. He picked up his knife and fork. He cut into the steak. But it wasn't over. Believe me, it wasn't even close to over. About 10 minutes passed. They ate. They talked. Tyson started to relax a little. His friend told him about her daughter starting school. He laughed. A real laugh, not the one he used for cameras. The one from his chest. For a few minutes he was just a guy from the neighborhood having dinner with a friend. Then the waiter came back to refill the wine. He filled Tyson's glass. Then he picked up the bottle and looked at the woman's glass, which was empty. He set the bottle down on the table. He didn't pour. He turned to leave. "Excuse me," the woman said. Her voice was calm but firm. "Could I get a refill, please?" The waiter stopped. He turned around. And this is where the whole thing cracked open, where the temperature of the room shifted so hard and so fast that 3 other tables stopped eating. The waiter looked at her glass, then looked at her and said, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear, "This particular vintage is reserved for our preferred clientele. Perhaps something else from the bar would be more suitable for you." She was drinking from the same bottle Tyson had ordered, the same wine that was already in her glass 10 minutes ago. The waiter was telling her she couldn't drink from the same bottle that was sitting on her own table. I swear this happened. Multiple witnesses confirmed it. What he was really saying, and everyone in that room understood it, was that she didn't belong there, that the wine, the table, the restaurant, all of it was for one kind of person, and she wasn't it. Tyson put his fork down. He didn't slam it. He placed it gently beside his plate, perfectly parallel to the knife. That small act of control was more terrifying than any explosion would have been. His friend said later that she saw a vein in his neck stand up that she'd never seen before. His eyes locked on the waiter, and he didn't blink. "Pour her glass," Tyson said, 3 words, flat, no anger in the voice. All the anger was underneath, compressed, held down with everything he had. The waiter straightened up. "Sir, I was merely suggesting—" "I didn't ask what you were suggesting." Tyson stood up. Not fast, slow. The chair didn't scrape, it just moved backward silently on the carpet. He was standing at his full height, which wasn't tall, but it didn't matter. The width of his shoulders blocked out the candlelight from the table behind him. His shadow fell across the waiter's face. "Now you gotta understand something. The old Mike Tyson, the one from before prison, would have grabbed this man by the collar and put him through the dessert cart. That's not an exaggeration. That's documented behavior. Tyson in his 20s was a lit fuse with legs. But this was a different Mike Tyson. Not a softer one, a more dangerous one. Because a man who can destroy you and chooses not to is more frightening than a man who can't help himself." The waiter took a step back. His heel hit the leg of the next table. A water glass wobbled. The couple sitting there looked up, alarmed. Tyson didn't move forward. He stayed planted. "Pour her glass." The waiter's hands were shaking. I'm not adding that for drama. His hands were actually shaking. He picked up the bottle. He poured. The wine almost missed the glass because his aim was off. A small puddle formed on the tablecloth. Tyson watched every drop. "Now apologize to her," Tyson said. Let me stop right here. This is the moment. This is the pivot. Because the waiter could have just said sorry. He could have swallowed his pride and walked away with his job, his teeth, and his dignity more or less intact. But some people, man. Some people would rather choke on their own poison than admit they were wrong. The waiter set the bottle down. He straightened his vest, and he said in a voice that was trying to be steady but wasn't, "I have nothing to apologize for. I was following house policy." House policy. Think about that for a second. He was standing in front of Mike Tyson, a man who had knocked out grown men in less time than it takes to sneeze, and he doubled down. He hid behind house policy, as if there was a page in some employee manual somewhere that said, "Certain wines are only for white patrons." Trust me, there wasn't. But the waiter said it with such practiced confidence that you could tell this wasn't his first time. This was a routine. This was something he'd done before, to other people, in other restaurants, maybe for his entire career. He'd just never done it in front of someone who could and would make him answer for it. Tyson didn't respond to the waiter, and this is where his genius showed up, a kind of genius that nobody ever gave him credit for. He turned away from the waiter entirely. He looked across the restaurant toward the front of the house, where a man in a dark suit was standing near the reservation podium. The manager. Tyson raised his hand, not a wave, just a raised hand, open palm, the universal gesture for "come here." The manager walked over quickly. He'd been watching. Everyone had been watching. "What seems to be the issue?" the manager asked, adjusting his tie as he approached. Tyson pointed at the waiter with his chin. Didn't use his hand, just his chin. "Ask him what he just said to my friend." The manager turned to the waiter. The waiter's face had gone from arrogant to uncertain. The mask was slipping. He started talking fast. "There was a misunderstanding about the wine service. I was simply explaining our selection policy and—" "He told her this wine wasn't for her," Tyson cut in. His voice was still calm, but it had dropped half an octave. "He served me and ignored her all night. He dropped her plate. He refused to pour her glass from a bottle I ordered and paid for. And when she asked for a refill, he told her, and I'm quoting here, that this vintage is reserved for preferred clientele." The manager's face changed. You could see the calculation happening in real time. On one hand, Mike Tyson. On the other hand, an employee who had apparently just said something indefensible in front of a dining room full of witnesses. This wasn't a close call. This was a 5-alarm fire. "Sir, I sincerely apologize," the manager said to Tyson, then turned to the woman. "Ma'am, I am deeply sorry. This does not reflect our values." Now here's the part that gets me. The woman, Tyson's friend from Brownsville, the one who had been disrespected all night, looked at the manager and said, "I know it doesn't reflect your values, but it reflects his. And I've been dealing with his values my entire life, in stores, in schools, at jobs, everywhere. The only difference tonight is that I'm sitting across from someone who wouldn't let it slide. Most nights, I'm alone, and nobody says a word. Dead silence. Not a fork moved. Not a glass clinked. A woman 3 tables over had her hand over her mouth. Tyson sat back down. He didn't sit down because the fight was over. He sat down because what his friend just said was more powerful than anything he could have done with his fists, and he knew it. The manager asked the waiter to leave the dining room. The waiter untied his apron, threw it on a side table, and walked toward the kitchen. But he stopped. He turned around. And this is the last desperate act of a man who knows he's lost but can't accept it. "You people don't understand," the waiter said, pointing vaguely at the table. "This restaurant has standards. This has always been a certain kind of place for a certain kind of—" "Walk," Tyson said. One word. He didn't stand up. He didn't raise his voice. He said it the way you'd say it to a dog that was about to cross a line. And the waiter walked, through the kitchen doors, gone. Mark this moment. That waiter never worked in fine dining in Manhattan again. Not because Tyson went on a campaign to destroy him. Because 4 other diners that night called the restaurant the next day to complain. Because the story spread through the service industry within a week. Because actions have consequences, even when you think the room is on your side. But here's the thing that makes this story different from every other celebrity stands up to racism story you've ever heard. Tyson wasn't done. The manager comped the entire meal, brought out a fresh bottle of wine, offered dessert on the house, the full damage control routine, and Tyson accepted it. Not for himself, for his friend. He wanted her to have the experience she deserved. So they ate dessert. They drank the new wine. And when the bill came, even though it said 0, Tyson left a tip. You know how much? $2,000, cash. On a meal he didn't pay for. But he didn't leave it for the waiter, obviously. He called over the busboy who had been clearing their plates all night. A young kid, maybe 19, Dominican, quiet, the kind of guy who does the hardest work in the restaurant and takes home the least money. Tyson handed him the cash directly. The kid's eyes went wide. He tried to refuse. Tyson closed the kid's fingers around the bills and said, "You were the only one who treated her right all night. You brought her water without being asked. I noticed. Take the money." That kid, and I found this out years later, used part of that money to pay for a semester of community college. He's a restaurant owner himself now, in Queens. Still tells the story. No, stop. Actually, stop for a second. Can we talk about what just happened there? Because most people hear a story about Mike Tyson in a restaurant, and they expect a table to get flipped. They expect someone to get hit. They expect chaos. And 20-year-old Tyson? Yeah, maybe. Probably. Almost certainly. But 30-year-old Tyson, the one who sat in a prison cell for 3 years and read books by Voltaire, by Alexandre Dumas, by Mao Zedong, by Maya Angelou, that Tyson understood something that most people never learn. Destruction is easy. Any fool can break things. The real power is in the restraint. The real devastation is in making someone confront exactly who they are, out loud, in front of everyone, with nowhere to hide. And that's what Tyson did that night. He didn't destroy the waiter physically. He destroyed his cover. He pulled back the curtain and made the man stand in his own ugliness in front of an entire room that could no longer pretend it wasn't there. You know what Tyson said about it later? A reporter asked him years afterward, during one of those long-form interviews where they try to get him to talk about the dark stuff. The reporter said, "I heard about the restaurant incident. Were you tempted to hit the guy?" Tyson was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Every second. I wanted to hurt him so bad my teeth ached. But then I looked at my friend and I thought about my mother. My mother got treated like that every day, and nobody ever stood up for her. Nobody ever made the guy apologize. So I thought, what would she have wanted me to do? Not hit him. She would have wanted him to say the words. She would have wanted him to look at a black woman and say, 'I'm sorry, you deserve to be here.' He didn't say it. But everyone in that room heard it anyway. That's the line. That's the quiet power line that hits different when you let it sit. Now, let me tell you what happened after that night, because the ripple went further than you'd think. The restaurant changed its hiring practices within 6 months, not publicly, not with a press release, quietly. They started requiring what they called hospitality sensitivity reviews for all front-of-house staff. They hired their first black sommelier a year later. Was it because of Tyson? Officially, no. Unofficially. Everyone who worked there at the time says yes, absolutely yes. Tyson's friend, the woman from Brownsville, she told the story at her church the following Sunday, not as a celebrity encounter, as a testimony. She stood at the pulpit and said, "I've been invisible in rooms my whole life, and for the first time someone made sure I was seen." The congregation stood, not because Mike Tyson was famous, because a friend had kept his promise to protect someone who had protected him with nothing but letters and loyalty. If this story hit you somewhere real, if you felt that moment when Tyson stood up from the table, if you understood why he sat back down, then you already know this channel is for you. Subscribe, not for the algorithm, for the stories that don't get told anywhere else. Hit that button, I'll keep bringing them. Now here's the part of the story that almost nobody knows. About 3 weeks after the restaurant incident, Tyson was training at a gym in the Catskills, getting ready for his comeback fights. Reporters were everywhere. One afternoon, a delivery guy showed up at the gym with a package, no return address. Tyson opened it in front of his trainer. Inside was a handwritten letter on plain paper. No letterhead, no signature. It read, "Mr. Tyson, I was wrong. I have been wrong for a long time. I don't expect your forgiveness. But I want you to know that what your friend said that night changed something in me. She said she deals with it every day and that most nights nobody says a word. I was the person who never said a word. And I was also the person who made it necessary. I'm sorry." It was from the waiter. Tyson folded the letter. He didn't show it to anyone that day. He put it in his bag. His trainer asked what it was. Tyson said, "Homework." That was it. But months later, in an interview that barely got any coverage because it wasn't about boxing, Tyson mentioned the letter. He said, "I got a letter from the guy at the restaurant. He apologized. Real apology. And you know what? I believe him. Because he didn't send it to a newspaper. He didn't put it on TV. He sent it to me. That's how you know it's real. When nobody's watching, that's when the truth comes out." And this is what separates legends from stories. Stories end when the action stops. Legends keep moving through people, changing shape, picking up weight. The busboy in Queens tells it one way. The woman from Brownsville tells it another. The waiter, wherever he is, probably tells it to himself on the nights he can't sleep. But the core stays the same. A man who was trained to destroy chose to build something instead. He built a moment of dignity for someone who had been denied it. He built accountability for someone who had avoided it. And he built a memory that outlasted every knockout, every headline, every controversy that would come after. You hear the name Mike Tyson, and you think about the uppercut, you think about Buster Douglas, you think about the ear. But the people who were in that restaurant that night, they don't think about any of that. They think about a man who stood up from a table slowly, who said pour her glass in a voice that left no room for negotiation, and who then sat back down and ate dessert with his friend like nothing had happened. Because that's the thing about real power. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need a highlight reel. It walks in, handles what needs handling, and sits back down. Tyson once said, "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth." We all know that quote. But that night in the restaurant, he proved something deeper. He proved that sometimes the hardest punch you can throw is the one you don't. The waiter came to work that night with a plan built on decades of unchecked arrogance, a plan that said people who looked like Tyson's friend didn't deserve the same glass of wine. And Tyson punched a hole through that plan without ever raising a fist. He punched it with patience, with precision, with the kind of discipline that 3 years in a cell and a lifetime of pain had forged into something unbreakable. His friend from Brownsville still has the menu from that night. She kept it. It's framed on her wall at home, not because the food was good, because it was the first time she sat in a room that tried to reject her and someone said, "No, not today. Not while I'm here." And somewhere in Queens, a former busboy turned restaurant owner has a policy posted in his kitchen. It's printed on a simple piece of paper, taped next to the health code certificate. It says, "Every guest at every table gets treated the same, no exceptions. If you can't do that, go work somewhere else." His staff asks him about it sometimes. New hires. They say, "Where'd that come from?" He just says, "A guy I met once." He doesn't say the name. He doesn't have to, because that's how legends work. They don't need a name tag. They don't need a title card. They live in the thing that changed, in the person who was standing there when the change happened, in the moment someone decided that silence was no longer acceptable. Mike Tyson walked into a restaurant to have dinner with a friend. He walked out having delivered one of the most devastating knockouts of his career, and he never threw a single punch. That's not boxing. That's not celebrity. That's a man who finally understood that the greatest fight of his life wasn't in a ring. It was at a table with a white tablecloth, a bottle of wine, and a woman from Brownsville who just wanted to eat her salmon in peace. And if that doesn't change the way you think about Mike Tyson, then you weren't listening. But I think you were. I think you heard every word. And I think the next time someone tells you Mike Tyson was nothing but a fighter, you'll remember this story. You'll remember the bread basket. You'll remember the wine. You'll remember the busboy with the $2,000. And you'll remember that the most powerful version of Mike Tyson wasn't the one who destroyed people. It was the one who decided to stop. That's the legend. Not the knockout, the restraint, not the fury, the grace. And it didn't happen under stadium lights with 20,000 people screaming. It happened in a quiet corner of a restaurant on the Upper East Side, with candles on the table and a friend across from him who deserved better. She got it that night, because of him. And that, right there, is why this story has been whispered about for decades. Not because Mike Tyson could have destroyed a man, because he chose to save one instead. The waiter, the busboy, his friend, maybe even himself, all in 45 minutes, all without a single punch. Some legends are built in the ring. This one was built at a dinner table, and it still stands.